Hey everyone, welcome back to the Tuesday Comic Review. If you're unfamiliar with what the Tuesday Comic Review is, on Tuesdays we review comics that are either a few months old or potentially even further back. And today happens to be one of those further back comics. We're going to be looking at Marvel Preview number 4, presents Star-Lord. This comic came out in 1975, and it's one that I've been looking for a long time at a decent price. I'm not going to say it's difficult to find, but it is difficult to find in pretty good condition at a pretty good price. But I lucked out and found a pretty good copy at a really great price. So I opened it up, went ahead and read it, and now I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. Because admittedly, this is not a comic that most people will probably be able to get their hands on due to a price point, and I think it's an interesting bit of history to go through. So the first thing you may notice right off the bat is that I pre-recorded the video. I did this mostly because the comic is older, and I don't want to expose it to the elements any more than I have to. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to transition into the digital versions of the print pages and review the book that way. I, like any modern day comic blasphemer, didn't really get into Star-Lord, or most comics for that matter, until the Marvel movies started coming out. When Guardians of the Galaxy came out, that was kind of my first introduction to Star-Lord as a character.
Who?
And already being a fan of Chris Pratt, I decided to go check out the comics. One of the first comics I picked up was the newer run of Star-Lord. I was really interested to learn about Peter Quill's background, where he came from, and Marvel did a pretty good job of introducing me to that. And what those comics told me is that Peter Quill had been a kid who had been orphaned, but had been taken up under the wing of a family friend who worked at a place that was building an interstellar rocket ship. Peter, who in the comic believed his mother had been murdered by aliens, took this to be his opportunity to steal the ship and go into space. Now, I didn't necessarily expect the story to be exactly the same when I went back and read Marvel Preview number 4. I expected Star-Lord's origins to be slightly different, and just kind of assumed that his story had been updated recently to reach newer fans like me. However, I was pleasantly surprised at how similar it was. His mother is still killed by aliens, and this is the thing that drives him to go into space. What's different about the two stories is that in the modern incarnation, Peter goes into space more as a young boy. You know, he's very brash, but still likable. In the older version, it's a guy who, while admittedly, yes, he has experienced something pretty dark and sinister in witnessing his mother's death, the effect that has on him drives him to basically be a royal jerk to everyone he meets the rest of his life. He's not brought in as a child, like he is in the modern era. Instead, he grows up driven by this idea that he's going to get into space and wreak vengeance on the aliens that took his mother's life. And so, in Marvel Preview number 4, Peter becomes an adult before he ever gets into space. He joins the space program, he fights to try to get the top spot, and he fails. And it's not until later, when he managed to get a secondary spot on a space station, that he gets his shot as Star-Lord. But again, unlike the modern incarnation of Peter, who is a little bit sympathetic of a character, this Peter is a big fat jerk and decides to fight everyone for the chance to become Star-Lord. Apparently, Star-Lord was originally a group of beings, potentially, that were chosen from various planets to represent their worlds as a Star-Lord. A Star-Lord from another planet shows up and basically informs everyone on the space station that, hey, we're looking for a new Star-Lord from your planet. One of you needs to be chosen, so you need to decide amongst yourselves who it's going to be. Peter immediately says, well, obviously it should be me. This is something that I've wanted my whole life. But understandably, everybody around him goes, you're a bit of a crazy person, you're a bit of a jerk, and we don't think you'd be the best representation for humanity. So what does he do? Shoots a bunch of people, potentially kills a bunch of people, and decides to take this mantle for himself. He decides he's going to become Star-Lord come hell or high water. And that's what he does. He gets whisked away somehow. It's a little confusing as to how, but he gets whisked away to see a godlike figure who basically gives him the power of Star-Lord, which gives him the ability to fly. That was interesting, because the new version of Star-Lord doesn't fly. He has rocket packs and things like that, but he doesn't fly of his own accord. I guess in the old version, they gave him the ability to fly. And they also gave him a gun that can control the 4 elements: earth, water, wind, fire, heart, go planet. I don't know. That's more than 4 elements, but he controls them. And I guess that's pretty cool. And to wrap it up, he does get vengeance on the aliens that killed his mother, but it's unclear as to whether or not it was a dream made by the godlike figure to help him fulfill his need for vengeance, or whether he actually did succeed in killing them. I've yet to read the later issues, however I do have them, and maybe in the future I'll do so. But overall, it wasn't a bad story. It was kind of interesting, and I think I liked it, at least from a historical perspective. It's interesting to see where our modern version of Peter Quill comes from. I will say this, though. I'm much happier with the modern version because he's much less of a jerk. I found it hard to get behind the old version of Peter Quill because he pushed everyone around and was a bit of a bully. Again, that's not to say the modern Peter Quill isn't a bully in his own right, but he has more sympathetic qualities than the older version seems to have. Aside from the story, this book is beautiful. It is in black and white, so there aren't any colors, but everything on the inside is really nicely detailed and really gives you a sense of what it was like to kind of grow up in the 70s with this mind of what the sci-fi future might look like. And all in all, I just found it really, really neat. Would I recommend going out to get this book? Not unless you really like Star-Lord or old comics. But I must say for myself, I'm really happy to have a copy of this, and I look forward to reading more about the older Peter Quill in the other issues I have. Anyway, that's all for today. Thank you again for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe, and I hope to see you again in the future.